So, dear friends, if I can ask you to take a seat. So, dear friends, Europe is under aggression. In EU's territory, that aggression is not happening, is not taking place by using guns or occupying land, by using words. But even if this aggression is by words, the point here is that propaganda war with lies and misinformation has a real tangible effect and is disturbing European societies, leading to real damage which can lead to real casualties. Also, the words are sometimes more effective than weapons because the causality of damage is less visible and more subtle. One fact stands. Less there is awareness about the tools, dynamics, and reality of propaganda and disinformation in hybrid warfare, more effective these tools are. Therefore, this is the very motivation of Martens to organize this event, Game of Trolls, turning words into weapons, to enhance awareness, to enhance understanding and knowledge. Today we will discuss about the tools and tactics of propaganda, as also the impact of propaganda in European societies. This event is now divided to two panels. In the morning, we will explore the struggles faced by journalists in the age of hate speech and organized propaganda, and in the afternoon, we focus specifically on the case study of Russian propaganda against Ukraine, one of which is maybe the most massive disinformation campaign ever taken place after the fall of the Soviet Union. The new information age is exciting, but it has its unfortunate drawbacks. For one example of that is the new tools to spread propaganda and disinformation. Online trolling is a good example of that. The European mass media and journalists in particular have become the victims of online harassment, hate speech, disinformation campaigns and other propaganda tools. Today we will hear some of concrete cases. But the main point here is that those tools are used people who are living in EU territory, among us, with us, and have to face this pressure. It is very important to understand that virtual reality in a new social is the new social reality, and also it's very powerful. We have many cases also in Europe where individuals who have been target of this hate speech, this kind of campaigning, have lost their jobs or had to change the place where they are living. So it's very powerful. And so now think that this kind of dynamics organized by a group of people with good strategy, well-resourced and backed by a state. It is truly powerful. This bullying and online harassment does not limit itself to journalists. Unfortunately, also other institutes and think tanks have to face this pressure. As you know, just for example, Martens Center has been very vocal about the developments in Ukraine, very critical about Russia, and as a result, our organization, Martens Center, and also our team members have been target of threats, even death threats. Of course, one of the main questions is today is to how to kind of counter this abuse of free speech without limiting the free speech, which is of course the free speech as being very important value for us. As mentioned in the war in Ukraine, Russia is using its propaganda tactics in hybrid warfare, but now Russia is also started to target other countries like Turkey and like Germany. As an example, we have our Lisa case in Germany, where official Russia demanded Germany to take action on claimed case of kidnapped girl from Russian immigrant family, and spontaneous demonstrations took place around Germany. Later, it appeared that the whole allegation, the whole story was in fact false, but we could already see what was the strategy and dynamics, and we can expect that such cases we will have more in the future. In this debate, we have two aims. Also, first of all, to see what are the institutional, what can the institutions, EU and NATO, do about to counter such dynamics, but also what are the ideas of journalists and media experts on how to respond to such abuse. I think for our two panels, we have really two excellent panels. We have policymakers, decision makers in EU institutions and from NATO, representatives of Ukrainian think tanks, also journalists who have been target of this kind of harassment and bullying campaigns, and also a Russian investigative reporter who worked undercover at the Russian troll factory. So we are looking forward for very interesting debate. I want to also thank Media Law Institute for their support to this event. It was greatly appreciated. And with this, I once again want to welcome you to learn about Game of Trolls. And we turn to our first panel, Protecting Freedom of Speech. And I give the floor to Ingrid Habets, who is our research officer of Martens Center and who will introduce and moderate the first panel. So welcome, Ingrid.
I'd like to invite the three panelists for this panel to sit next to me. I'll introduce them to you in a minute, so they have time to take their seat. Welcome also on my behalf. My name is Ingrid Habets. I'm research officer at the Martens Center and also assistant editor-in-chief of the European View, the policy journal of the Martens Center. I will be chairing the first panel of today, Protecting Freedom of Speech, Game of Trolls. The free world, as you know, they fight their battles with critical but reasonable words in order to bring about change. And their messengers, the writers, the journalists, but also the ordinary citizens, are protected under law. While the West uses these words to replace violence, President Putin turned those words into aggressive weapons by the creation of troll factories. The pen is mightier than the sword has gained a whole new meaning since Putin started his hybrid warfare in Ukraine. The freedom of speech is our basic right and a fundamental value of our free societies, and it's key to our vibrant liberal democracies. We all know that Russia isn't a liberal democracy, and it's not even near reaching the minimal standards of a democracy. Many of the fundamental rights are being violated under Putin's regime. And he has monopolized the media landscape in Russia, and he's now taking a swing at influencing Western media. However, he should not be allowed to restrict our rights too. Therefore, we're sitting here at today's event with the big question, how can we protect our freedoms, our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression, our freedom of the media from aggressive trolling? And to answer that question, we have three excellent panelists who have ample experience in trolling, receiving troll threats, and providing protection to journalists. But before I introduce them to you, I'd like to, I think we have to know what we're discussing. So I'd like to talk about the definition of trolling. And I've asked the panelists later on to add or disagree with me if they feel that the definition that I'm providing to you right now is incomplete. So according to what I thought trolling is that it's a tactical doctrine of psychological warfare based on the idea of reflexive control, which means that when people are being fed information, the target is to force these people to make preferred decisions, seemingly independent. And trolling has three goals that are reinforcing one another. The first is to influence people's mind and to install fear. And not just anyone's mind, not all of the citizens, but usually key people like decision makers that can make a difference in a free society. Second, to stop the participation of ordinary citizens and critical people in online discussions. And third, to provoke the target, which means that when the target defends himself, the attacker, the troll, will get confirmation that he's under attack. And I think this is where Putin is heading. He wants us to attack him back so that he can claim that indeed that his Russia is under attack by the West. Now, to address these many issues, we have an excellent panel. We have three journalists. The first is on my far right. It's Liudmila Savchuk. She's a Russian investigative journalist who was brave enough to go undercover for 2 months at an internet research agency, or what we would call a troll factory. And she now speaks out against trolling via the social media group that she founded called Information Peace. Our second panelist is on my close right. It's Jessikka Aro. She's a Finnish investigative journalist who led an investigation on Russian online propaganda. And for that, she became a victim of trolling by Russian trolls. And she just shared with me that the trolling has become worse in the last couple of weeks. And our third speaker in the middle is Jean-Paul Marthoz. He is an EU correspondent of the Committee to Protect Journalists and the vice chair of the Europe and Central Asia Division at Human Rights Watch. Liudmila doesn't speak English, so she has an interpreter. Please tell me if I'm going too fast, that you need more time. Liudmila, I'm very interested to hear about your personal experience as a troll and the things you have discovered while trolling. How have you been recruited? What were your tasks? And what is the strategy behind trolling? So in short, it's actually, how does it work? How does trolling work?
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Liudmila Savchuk. Я простой русский журналист. Так получилось, что одна из моих коллег работала там на фабрике троллей в Петербурге на улице Савушкина, 55.
So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am a humble Russian journalist, and it so happened that one of my colleagues used to work for the troll factory, which was located at Savushkina Street at the time in St. Petersburg.
И она очень поступила неосторожно и позвала меня туда. Я очень обрадовалась, так как некоторое время уже знала об этой фабрике, и это был мой шанс попасть туда.
And she actually called me in. She said she invited me to join them, and it was quite a step on my side, of which I haven't thought very much about. And I was very much excited about the opportunity to know more about their work, which I've heard already in the past.
Вообще любой человек может попасть на эту фабрику троллей, даже сегодня. Их объявления о вакансиях расположены на российских сайтах крупнейших, по поиску работы.
Actually, it's not difficult to be recruited by the troll factory. They advertise freely on all websites and about the vacancies that they have, and people can get recruited quite easily.
И в Петербурге вообще есть такая традиция у журналистов и горожан позвонить туда, прийти на собеседование и рассказать о том, что есть такая фабрика. Мой опыт в том, что я продержалась там довольно долго, 2 месяца.
And citizens and reporters alike in St. Petersburg have kind of a habit of coming in there and for an interview, and then they can talk freely about what they've seen and what they experienced there. My difference was that I've managed to get there and also to stick to my job for 2 months and a half.
Это большое офисное здание, там 4 этажа, и на каждом этаже очень много офисов и очень много людей, плотно стоят компьютеры, и плотно сидят люди и дышат друг другу в уши и затылки.
It's a kind of a large, massive 4-floor building, packed with computers and packed with people who are breathing in each other's ears and heads, and which really overcrowd the space.
Про уши и затылки?
Я сказала, да.
Хорошо. У них задача заполнить весь интернет и все сайты и все газеты прокремлевскими комментариями. Причем эти комментарии очень суровые и жесткие, то есть у них нет никаких ограничений в высказываниях, в эмоциях.
And their objectives are very much similar to the way they're seated in this building. Their main objective is to crowd the internet space, the mass media space, with the pro-Kremlin statements and comments, and they actually don't have any restrictions, any ethical or emotional limitations in what they're allowed to say.
Они работают в социальных сетях, на сайтах СМИ, на форумах. Они притворяются жителями России, россиянами, обычными людьми, тогда как, конечно, они, по моим наблюдениям, этого они всего не думают, это просто их работа, и они не читают статьи, которые комментируют и так далее.
They work massively on with social media, with social networks, with forums, with media at large. They pretend to be Russian citizens, well-informed they're Russian citizens, but in my opinion, they never really inform themselves. They never bother to read any information or to get a deeper insight in whatever they learn about Russia. Their objective is to fill the space with what is ordered, with what they believe fit.
Они притворяются также и иностранными гражданами, то есть французами, американцами, финнами и так далее, для того, чтобы продвигать кремлевскую пропаганду и ругать вас.
So sometimes they pretend to be foreign nationals in order for the propaganda and critical reviews of what is going on in the West will be more authoritative or more credible in the eyes of their audience.
И в данный момент, в эту минуту, несколько сотен людей сидят там на улице Савушкина в Петербурге. У них на компьютерах висят задания. Могу позже показать, кому интересно, примеры, где есть темы Украина, Сирия, Россия, США, Евросоюз.
And right now, as we are talking here, the hundreds of these people are sitting in this building with their laptops, with their computers in front of them, on which their daily assignments are posted. And these daily assignments consist of the list of topics they're supposed to cover, they're supposed to highlight in the information that's spread around. Among those topics are inevitably and invariably Ukraine, Syria, Russia, the United States.
Евросоюз.
And the European Union.
Что касается Евросоюза, то понятно, что это в основном тезисы, что, то, что вы сами знаете, что в Европе все геи, что здесь люди очень развращены, что здесь все очень плохо, бедность, безработица и так далее.
As far as the European Union concerned, you know the major allegations and postulates of the Russian-driven information about the massively gay society, an immoral society, poverty, unemployment, just name them.
И вчера мы с Джессикой как раз смотрели картинки и смеялись, насколько они и пишут об этом смешно, и рисуют картинки, и делают видео. В общем, все виды контента на эту тему, причем без каких-либо ограничений и... Хорошо.
Yesterday, we were reviewing with Jessikka the contents that they post on their internet sites. We were laughing aloud. They really have no limitations, these people, whether we're talking about the animated movies, the videos, or cartoons, or any other type of content.
И как раз мы с Джессикой обсуждали, что у них нет никаких ограничений по авторскому праву, то есть они берут и картинки, и тексты, и дальше переделывают их по своему усмотрению, сопровождая какими-то ужасными надписями.
They don't feel that they have any limitations on the part of the intellectual property. They can easily borrow some other picture, cartoon, or statement, and to accompany it by the self-invented comment, or the information doesn't exist.
Я хочу привести пример. Я попала в один из отделов, они пишут в ЖЖ LiveJournal. LiveJournal.com.
LiveJournal.
Я работала в отделе livejournal.com.
So, I'll give you an example. I can illustrate this by an example. I used to work for the livejournal.com.
Их задача сделать вид, что они жители, они придумывают любые образы и берут тезисы политические, и они должны их превратить в максимально человеческий какой-то образ. И так вот в моем отделе сотрудники делали образ гадалки, экстрасенса.
What these people do, what their main assignment is to select a particular topic and to try to individualize this, to tailor-made it into a human personage, into a human character, in order for this information to be, when is it presented, as humanized and as authoritative as possible. So they would kind of transform and pervert any sort of allegation, any sort of statement in this way. In my case, it was a person who can guess the future, what they call the extrasense in Russia.
Поэтому и сейчас вы можете встретить каких-то людей по всему миру, их страницы заполнены фотографиями, историями, и при этом между всем этим человеческим появляются вот эти кремлевские тезисы. Все это, скорее всего, тролли.
So there's plenty of narration behind it. There are plenty of human stories, at least stories that sound very much human. And although in bits and pieces of the stories you can see that the pro-Kremlin Putin propaganda trickles down. You can see every now and then the samples of this propaganda within the blocks of these human stories.
Maybe questions?
Yeah, Liudmila, it's actually very disturbing to hear that it's ordinary people that are being recruited, people that are not necessarily ideologically convinced of Putin's message, to fill the space with so much aggression and disinformation. And I was wondering, how can we distinguish the facts from the fake news and the information from the disinformation in that space that is being filled with so much rubbish?
Дезинформацию и дезинформацию. Каким образом можно проводить линию?
В смысле, как понять, что это...
Как находить, где дезинформация, где информация в таком пространстве информационном? Как отличать их друг от друга?
Что касается меня, то я в шоке.
As far as I'm concerned, I was in shock, of course.
Потому что они настолько везде, что результаты их работы я встречаю на своей страничке в социальной сети, в любых газетах, которые открываю, даже вот...
I'm shocked because they're basically ubiquitous, they're omnipresent. I face the results of their work or workings everywhere, in the reports, in the newspapers, in the social network. Wherever I go, I can just discern the patterns of their work.
Позавчера мой отец заворачивал мне банку варенья в литературную газету, и я там увидела заголовки «О, русофобы», или «На Западе все геи», ну что-то такое, в литературной газете.
The day before yesterday, as my dad was wrapping a jar of jam in a newspaper called Litteraturная газета, I saw on the cover page of this Litteraturная газета yet another title about people suffering Russophobia, or everybody suffering Russophobia in the West.
Они писали о безработице в Германии, но не писали о безработице в России, то, что было бы логично. Я хочу узнать о проблемах в моей стране и как они решаются.
So they were highlighting the problems of unemployment in Germany, while I would very much like to learn about the status of unemployment in Russia, what is going on in my country.
И когда я прихожу домой, и моя мама включила телевизор, выключила его и рассказывает мне, что журналисты нашли какую-то девочку-экстрасенса, которая говорит, что Путин несет добро в мир, а Обама несет зло в мир. Мне приходится снова и снова ей напоминать, как такие истории делаются.
And once again, as I spoke to my mom the day before yesterday, also told me that she saw on the television yet another lady, young lady, who was supposed to be a prophet and predict the future. And she said that Putin was bringing virtue and good to this world, to this universe, while on the contrary, Obama was a source of evil.
It's a very different view that we like to see. I'm turning to Jessikka. Thank you very much, Liudmila. Jessikka, you are a journalist and you did an investigation on Russian online propaganda. And Putin didn't like your conclusions or your investigation, and now you are harassed and attacked by trolls. And I was wondering if you could share with us your experience. How do these attacks happen, and how do you deal with them, and how can you do your work while being discredited by such a massive attack?
Of course, thank you. First of all, I would really like to thank Liuda for doing such a courageous job, because I'm really your fan, and you know, it's so amazing that you and other Russian journalists do your job, because you are also examples to us in West. Thank you. You're the best. Really.
Thank you. Я бы хотела добавить, да, что будучи там внутри фабрики, я постоянно слышала о неких финских журналистах, которые постоянно бегают вокруг. Можете сказать? Нет, там внутри я слышала про финских журналистов, которые там ходят и снимают вокруг.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that when I did some of my investigations, I also went to the St. Petersburg troll factory to film and gather all information I could get, because it was so secretive. I wanted to get all the information out. So she was at the moment working inside as troll, but I just didn't know it then. But only yesterday we found out that she was there, and she told me that at the time when I and my great colleagues Mika Mäkeläinen and our Russian journalist Fixer was there, the troll bosses didn't like us at all. They were saying inside the troll house that no, there are some Finnish journalists, and that they started to hate me and Finnish journalists so much for being there. And all I really did was just like investigate it and try to interview and get all the data out that I could. But they just hate that. They hate investigations, and they hate freedom of speech, and they hate that someone is just putting them out on public. But about my story, so my life was still normal 1.5 years ago. But then I started to do these troll investigations. I work with the public broadcaster YLE in Finland. So we published a crowdsourcing article in which we asked people to share their observation and knowledge about trolls harassing them and spreading Russian propaganda online in different forums. And I wanted to do such a crowdsource because it's impossible to really dig into this kind of topic without other people's and Finnish people's help. Because they're, as Liuda said, they're working in such wide sphere in online world. So then the trolls didn't like it so much, and after that it's just gotten worse and worse. At the moment I am being just all the time I am being investigated by the trolls. So everything I do or say is immediately, for example, if I make a posting on Facebook, the trolls take it and then they add it to some disinformation content and then publish the content. Also, right now, because this is streamed, probably the trolls are already taking screenshots of the streaming and then putting them up on the internet for everyone to laugh and saying that I am some kind of Russophobe and Nazi and whore and all this. Because that's what happened last time when I was speaking about this on EU. They made even a new Twitter account called Anti-Jessikka, and they started to make these clips of my speeches in the EU panel and spread all kind of propaganda about me. But it was just a small operation, and it got ended because someone filed the troll profile to Twitter and it was removed. But just, I really need to share this. I'm still actually recovering from the latest attack because it was really, really harsh. So last Tuesday I got a text message to my phone. This is really, really horrible. And everyone who knows about this in Finland, so about everyone, has said that this is the worst they have ever seen. And luckily they're supporting me so much. So I receive a text message from an unknown secret number asking, so do you still like speed? I hope you don't still take speed and buy it with tax money. And by the way, if your employer doesn't know, now he knows. So then I'm like, okay. And then my friends start to tell me that there is disinformation article about me, who already like 13 years ago had a little bit difficult phase in my life and had a fine from some drug-related using crime, so just small fine. And I went to court for that, and now the trolls, seriously, they had gone through all court papers in Finland and found my court sentence, and they made these huge headlines, me being the drug criminal, and me being like hinting that I am still using drugs and saying that I might have some kind of disease that the users normally have. And that's why my troll findings are so disturbed, because I am mentally ill for taking some drugs. And they put up earlier, they had taken some of my, because I do dancing as hobby, they had taken some of my dancing pictures from social media and internet, and they put the dancing pictures in the filth articles and said that, look, Jessikka Aro, the troll hunter, is there taking, having crack and dancing. And they also did in English language articles that I am some kind of a NATO drug dealer. And also they had taken some photos from my Facebook that I am, where I'm with a friend already years ago in New York at Times Square, and they had like photoshopped my friend away and put the picture of me there standing, and the text was something like, it's like my worst crime ever, Jessikka Aro in the territory of US. And that was also to prove that I'm some kind of NATO troll and some NATO assistant. So back to what happened 1.5 years ago. There's this very famous propaganda distributor in Finland called Johan Beckman. He works for the Mir bis Nazisma fake propaganda organization, which is worldwide, and has many activists in many countries, and which is apparently funded by Russia and does really bad infowar operations everywhere. And this Johan Beckman started to spread falsified information about me, that my troll crowdsourcing article is actually some kind of cooperation with, that I am well-known NATO and foreign intel services like assistant, and that I'm gathering some kind of register of Putin's supporters in Finland. And so he put this false information in over 10 Russian language fake sites. And after that, I started to get so disturbed emails and phone calls and everything. And after that, this whole 1.5 years until this moment, it has been just like going worse and worse. So it's just not like I'm sending some hang yourself crack whore messages, but it's worse than that, because they actually have some active helpers and some active, very well-informed, open source active helpers who can help them go through even court files, which is of course like secret information, but it can be dug out if you know what to do and how to do it. And then they use it to destroy not only you, but your family too. But this latest attack that they did now just proved to be so like the worst epic fail of pro-Russia propaganda info attack, because now we're just seeing a wave of support to me in Finland, because now every Finnish person sees how horrible, every normal Finnish person at least knows how horrible this is and how illegal this is and how filthy methods these pro-Russia propaganda distributors use. So thank you for anyone who did it. Now I also don't have any secrets to hide, so now I can do my investigations with even better enthusiasm than ever before. Thanks. Well done.
I was... Yeah, I was going to say, although I can only begin to imagine what you've gone through and are still going through, but you continued to do your work. Yeah. You weren't discouraged. So how successful are these troll attacks? I mean, maybe you're an exception. Maybe other people are not able to deal with it this strongly. But when is a trolling? When is it successful, and what can we do to counter it?
Yeah, I am at the moment thinking about different kind of changes to legislations, and I am thinking about starting to lobby some serious changes, because this cannot continue. Because in my troll investigations, I found out that many Finns had already been silenced themselves, as you were saying about reflexive control, so it had worked on them. And some people are just, they are not as psychologically prepared to handle these kinds of attacks as like journalists or anyone else who has been dealing with Russia, for example, for a little bit longer period of time and knows its history. So there is things we can do, but it's really good that we have these conferences so we can think about the best methods. But the best method that I have and I want to share with everyone is just keep on doing what you're doing. Because if you stop, the trolls will win. And who wants a troll to win? Nobody.
Thank you very much. To the people of the cameras, can I shift my chair so I can see my third speaker? Am I still? Because otherwise I have to talk through Jessikka. Jean-Paul, also welcome to the panel. We've heard a lot already about how trolling is done and what it is like to be a victim of it. I was looking at the Freedom House report of press freedom, and Russia is listed together with China and Saudi Arabia as not free, which I think is a, I don't know, it's a very marginal word. It scores 83 out of 100, with 100 being worse. And usually in those countries, they harass their journalists that are the national ones, their own journalists, or the ones that are based there. But this is a whole new game. Now Russia is attacking journalists that are not even based in their countries. They're attacking cross-border. And I was wondering, is this a new form of harassment by authoritarian regimes, or has this been it's maybe old and we never picked it up like that? Has it worsened? What can you share?
Well, I would say that as a journalist, I've been working as a journalist for many, many years. I mean, in the 80s, 70s and 80s, for instance, I studied, so long decades ago. You already had, I mean, a number of countries which tried to intimidate journalists across borders. I mean, during the Cold War, for instance, you really had, when you're covering, for instance, I covered, for instance, the Euro missile crisis, the deployment of Pershing and cruise missiles in the 80s. And I was regularly, I mean, attacked either directly by some diplomats who were cautiously reminding me that I was, I guess, a CIA agent or whatever, but also very, very rudely by members of front organizations, for instance, who were very aggressive in sending letters to the editor, in calling directly, and sometimes being quite threatening. I mean, even in demonstrations, for instance, sometimes they came to you and so said they rude things to you. So something happened at the time. So you already had this phenomenon. But the difference today is that the technology has turned the whole game into a much wider, much more efficient, much more intimidating force, and many countries resort to it. I mean, it's not only Russia, it's China or Saudi Arabia. You have in the Freedom House report, for instance, studying the internet freedom out of 65 countries that were studied by Freedom House, at least 24 were documented as using those kinds of tactics against journalists or against dissenters. So it's a global, a wider phenomenon that it used to be, because thanks to the, if I may say thanks, so because of the proliferation of technological capacities, I mean, it can really reach directly people and become a constant problem in the life of journalists. And we hear many journalists around the world that are just deciding to opt out, to sort of leave it. I mean, abandon the stories they are covering, because they are fed up of being sort of submitted to pressures. They're also afraid sometimes of what it means. If you are, for instance, a Mexican journalist and you are threatened by the drug cartels the same way as some countries do, some states do, I mean, it's true that it's very tough for journalists to resist those kinds of things. So for press freedom organizations, and I'm really, really happy to be here and hear those two journalists that are brave to either investigate or to resist those kinds of tensions. And it's part of our job at CBJ to try to support those journalists. We are, to some extent, rather quickly aware of the situation, because it's a form of threat. I mean, so it's which is not dissimilar to what happened to a journalist who receives a phone call in the middle of the night threatening that the journalist that something wrong will happen to him or to her or to his family if he or she continues to work on a specific story. Or it's getting a miniature coffin in Mexico because it's the first in the mail showing if you continue investigating, you will be dead. So we have been rather quick in our awareness of trying to address the issue. It's part of a wider question, which is the online security, for instance, the fact that very few journalists, very few media are well prepared and well trained to resist the attacks via the web. I mean, we really have a problem in the media that journalists are not well protected. They don't have either the awareness or they don't have the resources to protect themselves, and they are very much vulnerable to attacks that take the form of trolls, take the form of surveillance as well. So it's really an issue on which we have been working a lot. The other issue, I mean, is that of course we want to protect journalists from those kinds of intimidating threat, because it's really a major limitation on freedom of expression and on press freedom. At the same time, we're trying to be strong and sort of strong enough to make sure that we're not responding in a way which would compromise freedom of expression. So there's a tension here, and there's an additional tension. I'm European. I mean, I tend to listen to what the European Convention on Human Rights says about press freedom, but at the same time, I work for a US-based organization where there's a different concept, for instance, of hate speech, for instance. And so we have not solved those kinds of questions. To what extent should we accept in the comments sent to via Facebook or via Twitter or under the comment section of a media, to what extent do we interpret what is being said as hate speech that should be criminalized? In Europe, it's easier to criminalize, whereas the tradition of the First Amendment says, no, you have to accept you have a wider understanding of what should be allowed in a free society. That's a tension that has not been solved, and it shows itself in the discussions we have, for instance, with the internet search engines, with the internet service providers and the social media. We are in a moment of indefinition about who should be the police of the net, and what criteria should we respect. Should we go along the US way, which is much more open in accepting hate speech, or should we go along the European way, which is much more restrictive, or the UN way as well, with Article 20, for instance, which restricts much more seriously the scope for speech. So we have to say that as a press freedom group, we are in a moment of of course we want to make sure that we can protect journalists. At the same time, we are in a moment of indefinition, because the internet sphere today is quite rather vague in determining the parameters of what would be considered the scope of free speech or the limit of free speech. There's another issue, I mean, that so those questions of trolls, I mean, we have been rather quick in trying to address them, and we have been advising journalists, especially women journalists have been, there's an additional threat in journalism. It's women journalists. The journalists are threatened by trolls, for instance, or harassed by trolls, but if you are a woman journalist, there's an additional threat, an additional indignity to some extent, because people are really focusing, it's a form of sexual violence all the time. And it's something which has been, which will be, by the way, the subject of the next annual publication of our CPJ, which is called Attacks on the Press. And this year it's focused on violence against women journalists, and there are a number of chapters devoted to precisely online aggression against women. And so just in a few words, what we try to do is to develop a sort of philosophy. As you said, don't be impressed to some extent. Sometimes what we do, first of all, is expose the story. I mean, don't be shy about the fact that you're attacked. Expose it. Report it to the social media or to the other internet companies that are carrying it to you. Report it to the police at some point if it's really a systematic attack which carries really a criminal element in it. I mean, that's something that you have to do. You have to report it. There should be, I mean, like what you have been doing, I mean, investigating, I mean, counter-attacking by developing the skills of journalists to try to know who is behind it. Is it those kind of troll factories, but also governments. And really take it at the public level, as today. I mean, I think it's very important to have this kind of conference, because to some extent, I'm not sure that many people in public opinion do understand the impact of such tactics on the media. Of course, those tactics, I mean, you can document them and show that they have an impact on self-censorship for journalists. They are being intimidated. But also what we have to understand is that those tactics are part and parcel of a strategy, which is a global strategy at the national level. When you're using trolls, I mean, it's just one element in a global strategy of censorship and controlling the media, which is the case certainly with the not new, but authoritarian states. I mean, where those kinds of attacks via the online web, I mean, and it's just one element in a bigger picture which leads to buying up the media and putting people of the government at the head of the media, is in harassing the media inside, but also internationally. I mean, it's part of a more global propaganda, which involves even broadcasting channels, and it's part of the same thing. I mean, and so this is very important to understand the attacks via the trolls as just one part of a global picture. We are in a world where, again, there's a battle of opinion, of images and of discourses, which is global. And this is something that we have to understand. It's just not the individual fate of some journalists that targeted. It's much more than that. There is an ideology behind it. There is a strategy behind it. And it's something that we have to understand. And again here, our problem as a press freedom group is how far we go in accepting propaganda. I mean, propaganda is very unpalatable. It's very ungentlemanly, if I may say. But, for instance, press freedom groups have been very careful in trying to defend the right of governments to use sometimes broadcasters as propaganda tools. For instance, during the controversies that took place during the Kosovo War, for instance, or Libya War, I mean, the press freedom groups were nervous when they had to comment on attacks by NATO forces, for instance, against state broadcasters that were described by NATO forces as part of the command and control centers, part of the war system, whereas the journalists said, well, we're not sure, they might just be propaganda tools. In that case, there's a danger against freedom of expression. So you have this whole debate, these controversies that lasted for a few weeks and then petered out, but it's part of the discussion as well. So to what extent do we consider propaganda as just part of freedom of expression? That's an interesting discussion internationally. But what we do say as press freedom groups or freedom of expression groups in democratic societies, we say two things. I mean, first of all, that we should not combat those kinds of attacks against us with the tools of the enemy. We have to make sure that we use our principles of media freedom, media pluralism as the major force that we have to counter those attacks. And second, I think that we have to be very careful in democracies not to go into propaganda ourselves. Of course, there will always be some form of propaganda from democratic countries. Public diplomacy is about that. But there are limits to it that no democracy can trespass. And so there's something which I read the other day. I'm a fan of a famous US journalist who used to be the dean of American journalism in the 40s and in the 50s. And his name is Walter Lippmann. And he said, I mean, we shouldn't, I mean, our policy at democracies are bound to fail if we don't respect our principles and values, our treaties and our laws. And as he said, I mean, just allow me to just quote him correctly, and I think it's an inspiration for our work at CPJ. I mean, he said, it follows that in the great struggle with communism, it was the real Cold War at the time, we must find our strength by developing and applying our own principle, not in abandoning them. And I think it should be, at least it is from our perspective at CPJ, or even I could say at Human Rights Watch, we have to fight propaganda, we have to fight those attacks against the press by keeping faithful to our principles and not indulge ourselves in delivering half-truths and lies. And no, we have to be very strong on principles. I think this is the major lesson that I would certainly try to suggest to you to engage this debate.
All right, thank you, Jean-Paul. Just a short follow-up question. Do you think that certain democracies are already crossing that line, that thin line that you just described of not abandoning our principles? Have some democracies already gone there, or are they approaching this line?
No, I would say we have documented a number of countries that have been crossing lines. But you know, if I take even historically, I mean, one of the major moments when we were shocked, it was during, for instance, the 2003 war in Iraq. I mean, the fact that a government like the U.S. government, I mean, felt it necessary to use half-truths and manipulation of the media, and even to some extent some form of intimidations. You are with us, you are against us. It was something which was shocking to us. I mean, although we have to recognize that if you were a U.S. citizen at the time, you had the alternative. There were alternative voices that were not censored in the U.S. You had a number of media in the U.S. which were critical of the positions taken and the assertions that were not proved, that were launched by the U.S. government. And today, those journalists in those media are the pride of our profession. Yeah. That's the difference with what's happening in authoritarian countries, where propaganda, I mean, has no limit, except, and I really have to say how much we appreciate and the number of journalists in Russia, for instance, in the still remaining areas where there's still some possible dissent. I mean, we really sort of are. We are really, I mean, in awe in front of the courage to try to keep the virtues of independent journalism alive in an environment where basically everyone is called to apply the line, and everyone who disagrees is basically considered as a traitor, which is the worst, the foreign agent. law and everything. I think it's worse. But so.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor to the audience. If you have a question or a comment, please introduce yourself when you get your turn. I think your name is Alain Delotro. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Alain Delotro from the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for your courage. I have a series of questions to Liudmila, maybe tough ones. I start with the easiest one. Did you know who was your employer? Did the other young people there know who was your employer? Кто ваш работодатель? And second question to you. In your views, what is the percentage of the young people working there who believed in what they did, who were convinced in all this propaganda too? And to Jessikka, since 2013, 2014, all of our European states, at least those who are not sleeping, know that Russia has become aggressive, has attacked Ukraine, and is attacking us. So I guess the Finnish government knows that. The question to you, when you've been under attack, did you receive some support from the government agencies to help you deal with these attacks and, just concretely how to work on the internet, on your Facebook profiles? Did you receive some support from the state?
Okay. I suggest we answer these three questions first. Two of them are for Liudmila. Please go ahead.
Первый вопрос про Пригожина.
Почему Пригожина? Он спросил.
Владелец.
Работодатель спросил, работодатель.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Работодатель.
Кто был работодатель, который нанял вас на работу?
Был такой смешной день на фабрике, когда я там находилась, когда по кабинетам ходил человек и говорил: ребята, запомните, пожалуйста, где вы работаете. Интернет-исследование. Достаточно?
There was quite a funny day once that I worked for the troll factory. There was a person touring the studies or touring the rooms of the factory and saying to everybody, guys, you should remember who you work for. It is the Internet Research Center.
Это нужно было для того, чтобы они заполняли какие-то бумажки. Да, скажите.
Он спрашивал, значит, знали ли вы и все остальные, кто был кто вас нанимал на работу? Вот вопрос в чем был.
Я, конечно, была уже подготовлена, я знала, потому что я читала работы моих коллег, журналистов, о том, кто владелец, кто нанимает и так далее. А ребята внутри, которые там находятся, они не знают ни имени владельца, ни имени генерального директора этой компании. И вот, как я сказала, даже не помнят, как называется фирма, в которую они приходят.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, personally, I knew who it was because I've learned it from the reports and I've studied it and I've inquired and investigated it before. But for the rest of the population located there, they have had no knowledge either insight in who was the owner or who was the general director or indeed what the name was of that organization. That's why they needed to be reminded of that.
They know only this is very, very secret place and very important. Второй вопрос.
Второй вопрос в отношении процента молодых людей, убежденных в том, что поддавшихся на убеждение пропаганды.
Я не увидела там ни одного человека,
вообще
который...
в России.
в России, который, я думаю...
Или на фабрике? На фабрике.
Не увидела там ни одного человека, который действительно бы так думал. Вокруг... То есть они могут думать все что угодно, но скорее они не думают вообще, как мне показалось. Им дается тезис, и они просто его пересказывают своими словами.
Well, among those who I met at the troll factory, I don't think that anybody was really convinced about anything. I don't think indeed that anybody gave a thought to that or contemplated upon it. They were just busy accomplishing their assignments, working, elaborating on the subject matter they were given as an assignment.
Но мой коллега Марат, который также ушел оттуда и давал интервью, он отметил, что в его отделе как раз молодые люди, очень молодые, вот реализовали свою потребность посмеяться над кем-то, не будучи наказанными при этом анонимно.
But Marat, who left the job and who was with me there, he in the later interview said that in his particular case he believed it was an opportunity for young people to be able to mock at others without running a threat of being punished.
Ну, в общем, они так все там не думают.
So I don't think that anybody is really convinced or has any convictions whatsoever in the troll factor.
Thank you. The second question was addressed to Jessikka about whether you received government support to figure out how to protect yourself on the internet.
Yeah, that's really interesting question because I'm mostly interested in the humongous amount of support that I get from my audience. And the public in Finland who I work for, who I do my investigations and my stories for, they have been superbly supporting me all the way. And also they helped me to do my stories because it was crowdsourcing story. So I'm mostly interested in that. And when it comes to state support, I think that in Finland there is really good legislation, but which is the best guarantee that I can do my job freely. And it also provides me protection to do my job freely. So if these kinds of disgusting attacks happen, then there is legislation for that. So I think at the moment the Finnish state is supporting me with its legislation quite well, but always you can do better.
Okay. Thank you. I have 4 questions in the audience. I'm starting with the gentleman in the side aisle. And
Hi. A question largely for Liudmila, which I don't know if you can answer it. Did you have any sense of how this agency measured its success? Were they just looking for, whether their messages were being retweeted or reposted, or how did they know if they were doing well? And also, what was the key targets for them? Just was it to attack specific individuals, whether Russian or foreign? Was it to flood comments in news web portals, or did they have a concrete strategy?
thank you. Question from Roland.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm Roland Freudenstein, Policy Director of the Martens Center, and well, congratulations to all of our panelists here. My one observation, one comment to Jean-Paul. I have the impression that of course there is a danger of tendencies like trolling also appearing in free societies, but today that danger comes less from governments such as like the US government, as you said 15 years ago, or 10 years, 12 years ago. No, but today, if I look at Poland, for example, it's not the Polish government that sends trolls, but it's the governing party, PiS. And friends of mine have been regularly being threatened also by trolls that are obviously not on the payroll of that party, but are sympathizers. And it seems like these new right-wing populist parties across Europe seem to be very, very well organized in social media, much better than centrist, normal conservative or liberal political parties. So, I mean, I think that's where the main danger is coming from these days. And yes, I of course agree that we should not replicate. In some cases, we can't, even if we want it, we cannot replicate the Kremlin's methods, because it's a totally top-down system. And our system is and should also be bottom-up. And therefore, I think the reply to Russian trolling and propaganda should be actually carried by civil society. NGOs, individuals, networks of people, and so on. Thank you.
Let's start with those 2 questions, and I still have 2 more to go after that. So the first question is for Liudmila on the targets of trolling.
Я надеюсь, что я правильно поняла вопросы. Вот как я поняла, по моим наблюдениям, эта фабрика – это такой низовой уровень пропаганды, то есть самый такой простой. И на этой фабрике успешность измерялась в количестве просмотров, лайков, там, репостов, в количестве друзей у этих фальшивых аккаунтов и так далее.
In my understanding, the Troll Factory, or the media, so-called Media Research Center, was really representing a very baseline level of propaganda in Russia. And the way they measured their success was mainly through the number of positive reviews, through the number of likes, through the number of repostings, and the number of friends on Facebook.
Следующий вопрос касался целей мишени.
Тоже надеюсь, что правильно я поняла вопрос.
Либо наводнение, либо конкретные действия.
Дело в том, что они действительно наводняют, покрывают информационное пространство сплошняком своими тезисами.
As far as their techniques are concerned, they rather, as you rightfully mentioned, flood the information space with their allegations.
Но иногда у них идет точечные информационные кампании против конкретных людей, журналистов и так далее. И нужно уточнить, правильно ли я поняла.
But sometimes they also use the target campaigns against individual reporters. Is it? Does it?
То, о чем вы хотели услышать,
That's
да?
what you wanted to know.
Я хочу привести пример, почему нас это беспокоит с каждым днем все больше. Я живу в Петербурге, где я вижу, что вот такие информационные тролль-кампании ведутся уже не только против каких-то людей, которые на федеральные темы что-то несут в информационное пространство, но и против обычных людей. Сейчас я приведу примеры.
And what is of utmost concern to me is that I'm living in St. Petersburg, and what I have been observing lately is that these troll campaigns are now targeting not only the federal level journalists and reporters, but just ordinary people.
Когда против меня делали сюжеты на центральном российском телевидении, на Раше, РТ, крупнейшие газеты, «Комсомольская правда» и так далее, это как-то еще можно понять. Но когда против каких-то совершенно безобидных инициатив жителей, которые, например, защищают свой сквер от вырубки, или продвигают тему здорового образа жизни и велосипедизации города, против них ведутся вот такие кампании информационные, где используются те же методы, те же тезисы и то же оружие.
Clear enough, they have used their tools in order to publish the information about me on the broadcast on the Russian RT, or to publish it in the Komsomolskaya Pravda as a report who they considered as an adversary. But then they also targeted the ordinary citizens of St. Petersburg who would, for instance, protect their square from demolition, or who would promote the use of bicycles in St. Petersburg.
И получается сейчас, что обычный житель, россиянин, журналист он или нет, он абсолютно беззащитен против троллей и против журналистов-троллей.
And right now, this ordinary citizen finds himself without any defense or protection against trolley and troll journalists in particular.
Мы не знаем, как отвечать на такие нападки, на эту абсолютно страшную ложь, потому что в суде никак мы не можем защитить свои права вот в этом плане. И у нас нет никаких механизмов реагировать на ложь журналистов и нападки троллей.
And we don't indeed know how to protect ourselves against those blatant lies, neither in court nor anywhere else.
Средства массовой информации у нас сейчас такие же большие и маленькие фабрики троллей, так же, как и фабрика троллей.
Because the entire machine of Russian mass media right now can be considered as a larger scale troll factory.
Я слышала такую, ну, по некоторым данным, вот эта фабрика троллей на Савушкина 55 это такая опытная площадка для того, чтобы этот опыт потом передавать в другие сферы.
My understanding, and from what I heard, this troll factory at Savushkina Street in St. Petersburg is considered as a pilot project to be disseminated and widely spread all across Russia.
Я не слишком долго.
I'm sorry, perhaps I'm monopolizing the floor for too long time.
It's okay, maybe just to wrap up.
Хорошо. Да, последняя реплика. У нас, например, и действительно опыт передается дальше. Например, у Собянина, мэра Москвы, есть своя армия троллей. В Петербурге против жителей свои тролли работают, тоже там по темам городским. Мы видим это просто везде.
And we now can see it almost everywhere. Every mayor in Russia who respects himself is bound to have his own troll factory or her own troll factory. So Mr. Sobyanin in Moscow also has at his disposal a troll factory. And in St. Petersburg, of course, we have our own domestic one.
Right. Thank you. Jean-Paul, you had a question from Roland on the Polish situation?
Yes, I totally agree with you. I mentioned the 2003 US case as a reminder that what we should avoid in the future. But of course, I'm completely aware of the fact that today, I mean, most of those kinds of attacks, I mean, in Europe, come from non-state actors, sometimes sponsored by a government. It's the case in Poland, certainly, but also it's the case, for instance, in France, when the National Front has been very active in being very aggressive in the way they respond to journalists and try to destabilize them, and it's something which even you can see in the case of Syria, for instance. In Syria, if you write on Syria, it immediately triggers very strong responses, especially from the so-called re-information sites that pretend that everything you write as a Westerner, I mean, is a lie, or you're a tool, a stooge of Western imperialism in the region, and so suddenly, I mean, there have floods of attacks coming from, I mean, some site that you don't always know who they are. Sometimes you can track them, and sometimes you discover that those sites are very close to the National Front, for instance, in France. So yes, it's a major issue, but it raises another issue. You cannot protect yourself totally from a number of attacks. But personally, I mean, and on this, I do not necessarily represent the position of CPJ or Human Rights Watch, but as a journalist, I mean, quite traditional on this. I mean, I have a deep respect for debate in society, and so I always been ready to publish under my articles, my columns, answers that are very critical of what I write. But I have been very strict, I mean, in moderating my columns, forum and my blog. Very strict in moderating and asking to be the one moderating it and not the paper, and having a very strong software which eliminates first a number of absolutely silly automatic kind of stuff, and then when I get something, I get it through the email and I check it, and if there's no insult, there's no threat in it, I sometimes just I published it. If there is an insult against someone else, for instance, I sometimes even interact with a person and I say, okay, if you drop that insult, but you keep the idea, and the idea is against what I write and against the person you attack, I publish it. Unfortunately, I have never had an answer when I was writing this kind of a very nice, courteous kind of because I do think that many media have gone too far for a couple of years because of the obsession of having clicks, having too far and opening up too much the forum, at the risk of even degrading the image they have among the public, because sometimes you go to a media which is respectable, and suddenly, I mean, you read the flow of our answers and reply, you say, what, this media has this kind of public? well, I'm not going to be associated with this kind of media. And so now there is a reaction on the part of the media. And if you talk with people like people from the World Association of Newspapers, for instance, who have been having reflection of what should be the rules guiding the policy towards moderation and public debate, you see there's a retraction away from this obsession of having the largest public available at the risk of having nasty discussions and insulting discussions. For instance, Reuters has decided last year to drop comments under its news section, not under its opinion section, and a number of media have decided to be much stricter in the way they allow the debate. People would say, well, that's an aggression against freedom of expression and the plurality of voices. I agree, but to some extent, I mean, a media has absolutely the right, a media, especially a private media, has the right to define its own rules, as it has the right to define its own editorial position. So in that case, I'm particularly strict in making sure that I can eliminate everything which smacks of trolls or insult or threats from my own blogs and forum, which is not necessarily the case of the others in the same paper, where I can still see sometimes very lousy, very aggressive, very intimidating, very insulting comments. And I might be perhaps conservative, I don't know, but I believe in an informed and respectful, even strong debate. I like strong debates, but I do believe that we have to contribute as journalists to a high level of debate to make sure that we don't pollute the public discourse. That's my position. Many people disagree with me on this, even within my own organization. But as I say, I'm quite conservative when it comes to this question.
All right, thank you. The two questions, there's one on the second row, and after that, the gentleman halfway with the glasses. Yeah, the gentleman here on the second row. Yeah. Sorry, Bernarda, the gentleman here is first.
Thank you, Johan ten Geuzenam. I would like to go back to trawling and what trawling is, because I think we need to understand it a little bit better. And I have a question both for Liudmila and also for Jessikka. On, first of all, the trolling in Russia. From what you just said, Liudmila, I understand that the target of the troll is both inside Russia and international. Can you give an idea of the proportions? Is it mainly targeted at Russians or is it mainly international? And I suppose you can only talk about one troll factory, the pilot project, and not perhaps about the others in Russia. Second question is, and that is a big difference between the kind of issues that we have about hate speech, etc. Trolling, as far as I understand, is expression under false identity. People pretend to be somebody else. You are attacked, and you're not attacked by somebody who is angry or right-wing or whatever. No, it's somebody under a false identity. And I would like to know a bit more from Liudmila, what is done to hide the real identity of persons who make these troll attacks? And perhaps you have done investigation as well. Is it done very professionally, or is it technically in the end possible to trace the origin of the attacks? For example, the international attacks, can somebody see if you are attacked that it's coming from Russia? Is it technically possible to trace it, or is it done so well that it's impossible to trace? Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman halfway, the same block. Yes. And then
Thank you. Hello. Yeah, my name is Diederik Kramers. I'm a communications consultant here in Brussels, and I would like to add on the previous question regarding the international outreach, if I may call it, of trolling. I'm myself concerned with the campaign in the Netherlands next month, in early April, on the EU association agreement with Ukraine, and I'm interacting there also on social media. I would like to know: do you know anything about practices and strategy from troll factories for specific events and occasions, like this referendum in the Netherlands? Will they, do they have people who tweet or post reports in the national language, in Dutch? Do they have contacts with people or organizations in the Netherlands, for example, who would work on this on these issues and, well, shall I say, be active in the debate? Thank you.
I have one last question on this side, and Professor Monnier as well then. We only have a short 15 minutes, so when you get your turn to answer, keep it brief. Yes, and also...
Stasinopoulos, formally with the European Commission. I have a question for Jean-Paul, actually. You brought the issue of bias reporting by press in the Iraqi war in the United States. I was in the United States during that time, and I was teaching in a university, and it was very oppressive, actually. During that time, even somehow non-right-wing press in the United States, they didn't dare even to speak against. Okay, but my question is, it's very strange. In Europe, right-wing press is in favor of Russia, clearly, or even left-wing press. But in the United States, is there any evidence that right-wing press in the United States, very conservative, is contributing, I would say, to reinforce Russia's, let's say, nasty propaganda and policies? That's the question. I mean, nothing to justify, let's say, propaganda role by Russia because it's very unique, because it's state-controlled press, and behind that there is a government. In the United States, we cannot argue that way. There is no evidence, but the press, even television, it's quite biased very often.
Thank you. The last question here in Federico, to the front, to your side. Sir, can you raise your hand so they can see? Yes, thank you.
Okay, good morning to everybody. My name is Monnier. For a number of years, I've been involved in the development of European public diplomacy strategy and strategic communication, particularly relative to the countries in transition in Central Eastern Europe. My question is the following. We have in Moscow a European Union delegation staffed with press advisors and also communication advisors. We have also European Union embassies in Moscow, and now during this semester, the Dutch embassy is ensuring the presidency of the European Union in Moscow. I wonder if it's possible to identify a kind of a collective action relative to the Russian authorities or the Russian public opinion, including civil society organizations, in order to stress the importance of to respect some European values, including also freedom of speech and including also free access to information. My specific question for Madam Jessikka is the following. In order to avoid this kind of stalking or this kind of aggression, would it be possible for you as an investigative journalist to, for instance, to base your analysis on official facts and figures coming from, not only from Russia, but from international organizations, for instance, focusing on Russia? You may have facts and figures which are not contested. Some of them are even produced by Russian authorities on official basis through annual reports or whatever. So in this respect, you can protect your investigation by using local sources of information which have a kind of international, let's say, benediction, international support. This could be a technique that may protect you against false accusations. Okay, thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. So we have a couple of questions lined up. I would like to ask you to be concise and to the point. We have a couple of questions for Liudmila on the trolling, the identity of the trolls, whether they can be kept hidden or whether they can be exposed at some point. We have a question on whether the strategy of trolling are on specific occasions, for example, for the upcoming referendum in the Netherlands on Ukraine Association Agreement. So I think those three were for you, but if you feel you want to answer one of those three questions, please go ahead as well. Liudmila, keep it short, please.
Я думаю, что надо сделать запрос в администрацию президента.
I think to get answer to your question, you need to apply for the request to the presidential administration in Russia, meaning who are the targets, whether they're the foreign or Russian journalists.
Конечно, работа ведется на разных языках. Даже вот на этой низовой маленькой фабрике там работают люди на русском, украинском, английском языках. Есть другие места, где люди работают и на других языках мира. Но по статистике это в администрации президента мы можем узнать, наверное.
Therefore, I can't really answer with certainty that I know that in the troll factory, at the troll factory I used to work for, people work in several languages indeed. They work in Russian, they work in Ukrainian, they work in English. There are other places and locations where people are specialized in working in other languages. But then what is the proportion between those who are targeted abroad and in Russia is something that only the presidential administration can really answer with certainty.
Это была шутка в конце.
Of course, it's a joke, but anyway. As far as the second question is concerned, второй вопрос касается того, насколько технически можно выследить, кто стоит за этим.
У нас совершаются отдельные попытки посмотреть, откуда идут вот эти вот потоки именно тролль-атаки. И если какие-то журналисты начинают этим заниматься, это всегда можно узнать, такие данные есть. Я думаю, вам... Я думаю, если бы сейчас международное сообщество бы озаботилось этим вопросом, вполне можно увидеть, откуда идут вот эти вот информационные атаки, вот этот поток, и вполне можно хотя бы с троллями...
Людей, можно их отследить, их можно найти?
Да, можно отследить и хотя бы, понимаю, что нельзя, например, заглушить центральное телевидение российское, Russia и так далее, но в техническом отношении фабрики троллей вполне можно хотя бы затруднить их работу.
Yeah, I think if people in the West had tasked themselves with uncovering who are behind certain fake troll identities, they could have found it easily. They could have revealed it quite easily. And although, while certain mass media like Russia Today cannot be silenced indeed, some of the particularly lying troll factories could be at least interfered with or hampered with their work if in the West really people task themselves with it and if they wanted it.
У нас делаются такие попытки их хотя бы собирать списки троллей. Это делают простые люди российские, делают журналисты. Но вот это вот пока очень слабо организовано.
Some people are indeed involved in making up lists of trolls, both journalists and ordinary people in Russia. Some of them still are doing that, but the work is quite difficult, or at least made difficult. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Jean-Paul, you got a question, I think, about the left and right press in Europe, how it was pro-Russian. Is there such a thing also in the United States? Is the press or the right-wing press, is it more favorable towards Russia?
Well, it's difficult to generalize it, and to be fair, I mean, it would be dangerous to in a few seconds to summarize it. But it's true that in the US you have a number of right-wing media that are quite close to the philosophy of Putin. I mean, some like Pat Buchanan, for instance, who was a rather arch-conservative, former candidate for the Republican Party, who represents a sort of a nationalist view in the US. I mean, has been quite, has been often relaying, I mean, the legitimacy of the of Russia asking for, I mean, it is un-West message, if I may say, but it's a minority. You also have, I mean, some people in the US who are professors and academic institutions, for instance, who tend to be invited quite often by RT, by the former Russia Today, for instance, where they provide a sort of anti-US view, reinforcing the capacity of RT to say, I mean, the US is not better than others. I mean, things like this. But I would say it's a very marginal thing. I mean, I'm not going into the 2003. I wrote a book about 2003 and the press, and I try to be fair on it. So it's less. I mean, you cannot caricature the way, I mean, the US media covered the Iraqi war, because there were great examples and many more than people think of independent journalism regarding the positions of the US government. So.
Okay. There was a question, Jessikka, towards you, how to use facts and figures. I don't know if you want to say something about that. And I think there was a question pending on collective action to Russian authorities, how we can keep respect for our values. I don't know if there's something you want to say about that too.
It's such a nice idea. You can try that, and it should be tried. But if it has any effect, you never know. But my best guess is maybe just kind words aren't enough. Then also about my sources and my data sets. I have so many data sets. My stories are just based on so many different data sets and so many different sources. It's no matter what you do, that trolls will still try to destroy you and silence you if they see that you're doing such good job and are a high-profile target for them.
All right. Then I'd like to wrap up this session so we can all go to lunch and be on time for the second panel. As a takeaway, trolling is a very aggressive business, and many people are victim of it. But as a takeaway, and as Jessikka encouraged everyone to do, continue with your exercising your freedom of speech. Don't get discouraged. Like Jean-Paul said, there should be a better awareness for people about how to protect yourself, and we need more legislation on this as well. We also should better understand the trolling strategy so that we can prepare ourselves and counter to it. And I think most importantly, we should keep our principles high up there and not abandon them when countering trolling. And I'd like to thank the speakers for sharing their personal experience, but also their professional expertise, and the audience for staying until the end. We are offering lunch in the hall, and afterwards we're back at 13:40 for a second panel of the day, which is Information Warfare, Ukraine Under Immediate Threat, and it's moderated by our Policy Director, Roland Freudenstein. Thank you very much.